Jonathan stood by the window, staring out into the darkened garden, where the moonlight cast eerie shadows across the statues and flowers. It was just past midnight, and the old mansion he had recently moved into was silent, save for the occasional creak of wood. He had heard the rumors about the garden, how people claimed it was haunted, how they swore they had seen figures roaming its paths at night. Dismissing them as mere gossip, he had paid little attention until now. Tonight, an inexplicable urge drew him outside. Lantern in hand, Jonathan stepped into the cool night air. The garden was a labyrinth of pathways, overgrown with hedges and dotted with marble statues. In the stillness, even the slightest rustle of leaves felt magnified, and Jonathan's footsteps echoed unnaturally loud. As he wandered deeper, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The statues, delicate and beautiful by day, now seemed to take on a life of their own. Their blank eyes followed him, and he could almost swear they shifted positions when he wasn't looking. Near the center of the garden stood a fountain, its water glistening under the pale moon. It was there, beside the fountain, that Jonathan saw her, a woman in a flowing white gown, her dark hair cascading down her back. She was still, almost blending into the statues around her, but her presence was undeniable. Jonathan's heart quickened. He hadn't expected to see anyone, let alone someone so striking. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly would shatter the delicate silence. The woman slowly turned to face him, her eyes catching the moonlight. She was beautiful, but there was something unsettling about her, an air of timelessness. She smiled, a slow, mysterious smile. "I've been waiting for you," she said softly, her words drifting through the night like a breeze. Jonathan felt a chill creep down his spine. "Waiting? For me?" She nodded, her gaze never wavering. "Yes, welcome to the Garden of Good and Evil." Jonathan stood frozen, torn between fear and fascination. He wanted to ask more, to understand what she meant, but words failed him. The garden, once just a tangle of plants and statues, now felt like something alive, something that had lured him out of the safety of his home and into its dark, enigmatic embrace. Jonathan's days blurred after that first encounter. Each night, he returned to the garden, drawn by a compulsion he couldn't explain. Evelyn, the mysterious woman, would always be there, gliding silently among the flowers and statues. She moved with a grace that seemed otherworldly, as if she belonged to the garden more than any human could. During their nightly meetings, Evelyn spoke in riddles, her words hinting at a deeper truth. "The garden is more than it seems," she would say, her fingers trailing over a rose petal. "It is a place where light and darkness coexist, where beauty hides secrets." She seemed to know the garden's every corner, its history and its hidden pathways. Jonathan, despite his unease, found himself entranced by her. He was desperate to understand the strange connection she had to this place. Determined to uncover the truth, Jonathan spent his days researching. He combed through the mansion's dusty library, searching for anything that might explain who Evelyn was or why she was here. He found little until one afternoon he stumbled upon an old, faded photograph. It showed a woman standing by the fountain, her dark hair and serene expression unmistakable. It was Evelyn. But the photograph was dated over a century ago. Jonathan's heart raced. How could she be the same woman he spoke to every night? Was she a ghost, a spirit bound to the garden, or something else entirely? That evening, when he met Evelyn, he brought the photograph with him, hoping she would give him answers. "Who are you, really?" he asked, holding up the image. "How can this be you?" Evelyn glanced at the photograph and smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "Time moves differently here," she said, her voice soft. "I am the garden, and the garden is me. We are bound together forever." Jonathan was left with more questions than answers. Was Evelyn a part of the garden's enchantment, or was she the one who controlled it? And what did she mean by being bound to it? Every time he thought he was closer to understanding, she would slip back into her cryptic ways, leaving him to piece together the fragments she gave him. Yet, despite the mystery and the growing sense of dread, he couldn't stay away. The garden with its dark allure had become his obsession, and Evelyn his guide through its twisted, tangled secrets. Jonathan's obsession with the garden deepened, and with it, the atmosphere around him darkened. The once vibrant flowers wilted, and the statues seemed more menacing, their eyes sharper, their expressions colder. It was as if the garden was reacting to his confusion, feeding off his fears and doubts. Yet, he continued to meet Evelyn each night, desperate to unravel the mystery she embodied. Evelyn's presence was both comforting and unsettling. She spoke of the garden as if it were a living entity, a place where light and darkness intertwined. Everything here has its opposite, she would say, her fingers brushing against a dying rose, just as every person does. Jonathan sensed that she was trying to reveal something deeper, but her words always felt like a riddle, just out of reach. One evening, Evelyn's demeanor changed. She was more serious, her usual cryptic smile replaced by a solemn expression. "You want to understand, don't you?" she asked. "To see the truth of this place?" Jonathan nodded, his heart pounding. He had waited for this moment, the chance to finally understand what lay at the heart of the garden's secrets. Evelyn stepped closer, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. "The garden is a gateway," she said, "a place where the boundary between good and evil blurs. It does not choose sides, it merely reveals the balance within every soul." She paused, letting her words sink in. "If you wish to see everything, Jonathan, you must make a choice, but it will come at a cost." Jonathan felt a chill. "What do you mean, a cost?" he asked, his voice unsteady. Evelyn's gaze was unyielding. "Your trust," she said simply. "You must trust me, and in return, you will see what lies beneath the surface of this world." Despite the fear curling in his stomach, Jonathan couldn't turn back. He had come too far, and the answers he sought were within his grasp. "I'll do it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Evelyn's smile returned, but it was darker, almost triumphant. "Then follow me," she said, extending her hand. As he took it, the garden around them seemed to come alive. The wind picked up, howling through the trees, and the shadows deepened, twisting into strange, unsettling shapes. Jonathan realized he had entered a place where nothing was as it seemed, and there was no turning back now. Evelyn led Jonathan deeper into the garden, farther than he had ever ventured. The path twisted and turned, and the air grew colder, heavier. The wind howled through the trees, and shadows stretched like dark, skeletal hands across the ground. It felt as though the garden was pulling him into its depths, eager to reveal its darkest secrets. They stopped at a small clearing, surrounded by gnarled vines and withered flowers. In the center stood a mirror, its surface rippling as if it were made of water. Evelyn turned to Jonathan, her eyes intense. "This is where you will see the truth," she said. "The garden reflects what lies within. It shows the balance or imbalance of light and darkness in every soul." Jonathan hesitated, his heart pounding. "What will I see?" he asked, his voice trembling. Evelyn didn't answer, only gestured to the mirror. "Look," she said softly. Jonathan stepped forward and peered into the glass. At first, he saw only his own reflection. But then the image began to change. His face twisted, darkened, his eyes filled with a cold, cruel glint. It was still him, but a version of himself consumed by shadows, a reflection of his deepest fears and darkest thoughts. He staggered back, horrified. "What is this?" he demanded, turning to Evelyn. "Is this who I am?" Evelyn's expression was calm, almost sad. "Every soul carries light and darkness," she said. "The garden does not choose, it merely reveals. This is what lies beneath the surface, Jonathan, the parts of you that you hide, even from yourself." Jonathan's mind raced. Was he truly capable of becoming what he saw in the mirror? Was this dark version of himself the truth, or just a possibility? He realized then that the garden had been testing him, exposing his innermost self, forcing him to confront the battle within. "You have a choice," Evelyn said, her voice gentle. "You can embrace the darkness, let it consume you, and become a part of this garden's endless cycle. Or you can choose the light and leave it behind." Jonathan's chest tightened. For a moment he felt the pull of the shadows, the seductive whisper of surrender. But then he remembered why he'd come, to find the truth, not to be lost in it. "I choose to leave," he said, his voice firm. "I won't be trapped here." Evelyn nodded, as if she had expected his answer. "Then go," she said. "But remember, the garden is always here, waiting, and so am I." As Jonathan turned to leave, the garden began to change. The shadows receded, the flowers bloomed, and the air grew warm. He walked away, not daring to look back, knowing that the garden's pull would always be there, lurking in the corners of his mind. But he had made his choice, and that was enough. At dawn, Jonathan emerged from the garden, leaving behind its mysteries and the ghostly figure of Evelyn. He understood now that the garden was not just a place, it was a mirror of the soul, a reflection of the eternal struggle between good and evil within every here.